The Religious Philosophies of Aliens on Zoom. This is a presentation I delivered which discusses a specific chapter of Sadaputa's book called Parallels, or Alien Identities, Ancient Insights into Modern UFO Phenomena. Enjoy.
So what I wanted to do, of course, the theme for today is chapter 11, entitled UFOs and Religion, or as perhaps would be better to say UFOs and religious thought or religious philosophy, because that seems to be the main emphasis on the chapter. I wanted to read out and share some of the highlights and what I would consider the main points of this chapter and some of the most interesting points. Sadaputa writes that in many UFO encounters, the UFOnauts are said to be uncommunicative, or there's a lack of proper communication. However, there are other encounters which are said to deliver elaborate philosophical discourses. This frequently happens in encounters involving the more friendly contact, as you might expect. And the philosophies that get exchanged can be summarized as follows, adds Sadaputa. There is life throughout the universe, and this includes vast numbers of beings that are very similar to ourselves in form and behavior. We can call these beings humanoids. They are conscious and they have humanly recognizable emotions. They also generally have highly developed psychic abilities. These beings, like ourselves, are souls inhabiting various material bodies as souls. They transmigrate from one physical body to another, whether it's gross or subtle forms. They also always consistently believe there are other planes of existence that terrestrial humans are not aware of. These planes are inhabited by humanoid beings, and some of these beings are able to travel from one plane to another, and that's how they're able to visit the Earth. Some of them can also exert control over the gross and subtle bodies of human beings themselves. It's fascinating. The philosophy often can be summarized as saying they do believe the Creator is present everywhere and acts everywhere through nature. The Creator is often regarded as impersonal, however, and it is said that to be nearly incomprehensible and inaccessible, certainly to human beings. At the highest level, the Creator is regarded as the One, as eternal, non-dual being, full of love and light. These, of course, are the positive beings' philosophies. It is also said that the evolution of consciousness will bring one to the point of experiencing the One, or entering into it. Of course, that's very, very fascinating stuff. And of course, in India, this kind of philosophy of merging into the impersonal Brahman, or the impersonal absolute, is actually quite common. Fascinating stuff. Now, just to kind of go into a few examples of that Sadaputa gives from this. The UFO researcher, Don Ackling, has compiled a great deal of channeled material that purportedly, that's what he says, comes from entities from other worlds. Fascinating. He observed that this testimony described highly consistent patterns, even though it comes from many widely separated individuals from all walks of life. References to the soul, reincarnation, and higher planes or dimensions are common. So let's have a look at some of those cases, turning to the case of a face-to-face contact. A Southern Baptist minister in Puerto Rico claimed to have had many meetings with humanoid beings from the planet Koshnak. In the direction of the constellation of Orion, these beings were very similar in appearance to the familiar grey entities, that they had melon-shaped, expressionless faces with thin lips, undeveloped noses and ears, and high, large, wraparound eyes without pupils. However, unlike the typical encounters with the Greys, the beings treated the man in a very friendly way, unlike the Greys. One of them was named Oshnesto, who took him on rides in one of their vehicles, or vimanas, and showed him undersea bases on the Earth, and telepathically presented him with long philosophical discourses about time, about space, and the reasons for human existence. This also, of course, included higher dimensions. Another really kind of interesting example here I wanted to share from Sadaputa's book, Mrs. Cynthia Appleton, who's a mother of two living in North Birmingham in the UK. She claimed two figures spoke to her in a strange style in English language, informing her that they were projections and should not be touched. One point they made was that the deity itself dwells at the heart, at the core of the atom. It is said there were no books in Mrs. Appleton's house, only newspapers. So how did she get this philosophy? Those who interviewed her described her as a pleasant and sincere young woman. Now, the extraterrestrial story, as described by Billy Meyer, is one of the most elaborately developed stories in all this. His claim is understanding the philosophical, theological views of a beautiful alien contact, female contact, called Semjesi. And she actually says, above everything, one alone possesses the power of life and death over each creature. That is creation alone, which regulates the laws over all, laws which are irrefutable and of their own eternal validity. Semjesi strongly emphasized that there was no personal creator and that the supreme creation is strictly impersonal. She maintained that religions devoted to a personal God would have a detrimental effect on the human spirit, which is kind of interesting. Semjesi was obviously a big impersonalist here. But of course, she pointed out that even though the creation was impersonal, its laws are personal in nature. Thus, Semjesi said that the real spiritual people don't pray for needs. They don't pray for material things. They know that because of the Almighty Spirit within themselves, they will get all they need, and besides all they want, as long as it's according to the cosmic law of love to all. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Now, if the personal quality of love is built into cosmic law, then it is natural to ask why. If there's a transcendental person behind the cosmic law, then the answer is that the law was crafted according to the loving intentions of that person. That could be a counter argument. Anyway, the philosophical points brought up by Semjesi are certainly not new, of course, in human terrestrial society. And one wonders where Maya really got them from. All the points, of course, are well known in Indian philosophy, and Maya was known to have spent time in India. So the authenticity of this is questionable, but nevertheless interesting because we're delving here into the UFO contactee culture. In November 1919, Alice Ann Bailey was sitting under a tree on a hillside in California, we learn, resting. Suddenly, she sat up, startled. I heard what I thought was a clear note of music, which sounded from the sky, through the hill, and in me. Then I heard a voice which said, there are some books which it is destined that you will write. You must write them. Will you do this? After that experience, in due course, she did indeed write a number of volumes on that were claimed to have been dictated telepathically to her from the person that addressed her, that she called the Tibetan. Bailey's experience on the hillside is reminiscent of many UFO encounters in which a person receives a telepathic message that is following a high-pitched sound. Her books consist of ideas from Christianity and also elements of Buddhism, the Vedic text, and also Western occult traditions that have been woven together. It may be her attempt to assimilate these different philosophies, of course. But to see their possible connections with the UFO phenomena, consider the following points from the teachings of the Tibetan. This is what Sadaputa lists. He made predictions of great disasters. This is something quite common. He made predictions about various future political and technical developments. He said that the humans of the earth are deplorable and terrible in behavior. He presented love as the impelling motive for manifestation. He said that through the union of science and religion, this shatters materialism. Interesting. And on the other, the sentimental devotion of many faiths is also shattered. Statements now, of course, along these lines are frequently made in reported UFO communications, as I mentioned. And they often say that they have been visiting the Earth for thousands of years and they have extremely long lifespans. They point out they have been worshipped in the past as gods, but actually they are not gods. They may be superior to human beings, but they're not gods. Of course, this makes me think of the works of Eric von Daniken, books like Chariots of the Gods or Gold of the Gods or Return of the Gods and so forth, where he theorizes that, of course, a lot of religious text and other cultural streams which describe gods or describe superior beings are actually more or less superior aliens from other realms. Of course, as I've mentioned before in other lectures by myself, if you look at the book of Ezekiel in the Bible, where he saw wheels upon wheels in the sky, of course, described as angels, but could it have just basically been beings from other worlds? Then, of course, there's Elijah. Of course, Elijah, the biblical character who gets whisked off in a fiery chariot in the sky. And in the book of Genesis, we learn about the sons of God who came down to the earth and knew the daughters of men to produce renowned and giant-like offspring. So this is again where ufology and religion kind of coincide with each other. And remember, according to the Vedic perspective, a joint program carried out by human sages and UFO humanoids is definitely not out of the question, because we see this in the Puranas or something similar if we read it in that way, in that perspective. The Vedic literature describe a world in which ordinary people and powerful yogis coexist with a variety of human-like races. These races are often known to travel in vimanas, flying craft. The spiritual philosophies based on impersonal conceptions of God are said to be quite prominent among yogis themselves and these other mystically endowed beings. So how can we summarize the prominent philosophies that are given or supposed to have been given by these alien beings to the human race? There's the atheistic Sankhya philosophy, appeals to a person who wishes to make progress in material life in a way which is harmonious with universal law. In contrast, the philosophy of Advaita Vedanta appeals to one who wishes to abandon material life and merge into the absolute. For example, the goal of the so-called pleiadians, which we sometimes hear about, as presented and as presented by Billy Meyer, is to live an advanced material life by obeying the cosmic law. Meanwhile, the aim of the Ra, there's a being known as the Ra, is to attain ultimate oneness. Of course, in contrast to that, Vaishnava philosophy, Brahman, the impersonal Brahman, is the effulgence of the transcendental body of the Supreme Personal Lord, Lord Krishna, and it forms the atmosphere of the spiritual world. So these aliens are all impersonalists rather than personists, it would seem. Let's do another couple of stories, if I may. Now, the three children who famously received revelations during the famous Fatima case in Portugal, they also had what appeared to be an experience of the Brahmajyoti, the impersonal Brahman. After the initial conversations between the children and the effulgent lady, who they said was Mother Mary, she opened her hands and streams of intense light flowed from them, which overwhelmed the children's souls, causing them to feel lost in God, whom they recognized in that light. Now, this description actually does make sense in the Vedic viewpoint. She's a person, and she's giving off some impersonal energy, a bit like the sun being the personality and the sun rays being the energy. But the point here is that when it comes to UFO abduction stories, few actually discuss a personal conception of God or a loving conception of God. This material conveys a positive overall message, but at the same time, many UFO encounters have a less auspicious aspect. It is not uncommon, for example, for reported communications from these entities to contain doubtful or even absurd, contradictory, perhaps, things that simply don't make sense. But that in itself is not a disqualification, because a lot of stories in the Puranas don't make sense. It doesn't mean they're not true. Perhaps we just simply don't have the vocabulary or the experience to understand them. The basic idea is that in order to preserve the free will of human beings, it's necessary to withhold information from them and even bewilder them with false information to test their faith. Could be a possibility there. This conception may help explain not only the bewildering character of UFO communications, but also the elusive nature of UFO evidence in general. Often this evidence is strong enough to be impressive, but is nevertheless so overwhelming that a skeptic will be denied his own free will in deciding whether to accept it or not. In fact, we could even relate this kind of concept with some of the things we read in the Puranas, where we're reading a very moral story which makes a lot of sense from our point of view. Suddenly something unscientific or absurd appears, and we wonder whether or not, of course, it's describing things beyond our comprehension with our limited vocabulary, or whether this is simply an ingredient of the text in order to test our devotion as something beyond our mundane life. In Sadaputa's chapter 11 on UFOs and religion, getting towards the end of it, or the end of some of the parts I've decided to emphasize, he writes that some UFO phenomena may be directly caused by the mode of darkness. We cannot rule that out. Those beings that frighten people, but at the same time expand their understanding of life and its powers. Some of these phenomena may involve a genuine protest by beings that live in our own world that are disturbed by our technological misadventures, but nevertheless may have disrespect for us. Other phenomena may involve preaching programs carried out by beings who have a message to convey. After all, the religious proselytizing does not have to be limited to ordinary humans. Why can it not be throughout the universe? Anyway, all these possibilities, Sadaputa adds, are consistent with the Vedic tradition. According to the ancient Vedic text, there was a time when people of this earth were in regular contact with many different types of beings, from negative entities in the mode of darkness to the great sages in advanced states of spiritual consciousness. The modern phenomena tends to confirm the Vedic picture. A very key sentence that Sadaputa writes here. I'll say it again. The modern phenomena tends to confirm the Vedic picture. But in summary, I'd also like to say something else. There's different beings out there which have slightly different philosophies, but they have certain things in common. None of them appear to be highly personal. Some of the beings that come, which are said to abuse mankind or to perhaps even have a philosophy which is inimical or outright atheist, perhaps they belong to the lower planetary systems. Others, they come with a message of love and light. They may be impersonal, but their intentions may be for the betterment of mankind. And it could be argued that they are from the Bhavaloka system higher than the Earth, but not necessarily in the highest realms of the universe. The highest realms of the universe, what we call the demigods or the higher beings and these great lokas, tend to be personists and don't even need the use of vimanas or flying machines. A good example would be Narad Muni, of course, who is always chanting the names of Narayan, Narayan, Narayan. So in the Vedic universe, there's actually space for all these different philosophies and all these different origins of beings associated with these philosophies.